Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together in Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, the very bottom line. After the Gemara had quoted the Mishnah discussed at length, Al Sholosh Averos Noshim, Meisas B'Shas Leidoson, Al Shena Zehiros, Benila, Bechalo, V'Halokas Haner, when they're careless in these mitzvahs of Nida, Chala, and Halokas Haner, there's a severe penalty. Our Gemara now brings Braisos along these lines. Tanya, first the Brisa quotes Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Oimer, Hilchos Hekdesh, Trumois Umaisros, Hein Gufei Torah. The halachos of Hekdesh, when a person sanctifies an object, either an animal for a carbon or something else for the Beis Hamikdosh, Trumois that are given to the Kohen from his grain, Umaisros that are given tithes both to the Levi and some years to either an Oni and sometimes brought to Yerushalayim as Meiser Sheni. They are Gufei Torah, they are essentials of the Torah. V'nimsu la'am ha'aretz. And the Brisa makes a point of saying they were given over to Am ha'aretz. That means that the Torah was not concerned that even though Am ha'aretz are going to be responsible to taking these tithes and the trumos and even being makdish, either a behema or an object, subsequently a person might buy something from them, and therefore they can rely, min haTorah at least, they can rely on the salesperson that this is not hekdesh, or that the trumas and maisus were taken away from this grain. Subsequently, of course, the Rabbanan said there's something called demai, that a person who does acquire grains from an am ha'aretz, then it's demai, and therefore l'chumra he must meiser them. Says the Gemara Tanya, Rabbi Nasin Oimer, Be'avon Nidorim, Mesa Isha Shel Adam. On the avon, the iniquity of Nidorim, when a person is negligent with his Nidorim, that means he's mavatil, the Nidorim that he makes, and decides that he's not going to fulfill them, then the penalty is that Isha Shel Adam is Mesa. And it brings a pasuk She'emar, Im ein lechosh l'shalem, if you don't have what to pay, lama yikach mishkavcha mitachtecha. Why are you taking your bed in your place? Meaning to say that the creditor, then it says, why are you taking a vow if you can't pay for your vow? If you can't pay for your credit? So to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the great creditor, says, if you can't pay for your vow, then mishkavcha, a reference to one's wife, will be mitachtecha, will be taken from in place of it. Rabbi Oimer, Rabbi says, Be'ovan nidorim bonim meisim. Children die as a result of the iniquity, the oven of nidorim, kishem ketanim, when they are children. Shneimaz, it says, Al titen es picha lachti es bisarecha. Don't give your mouth to cause to sin your flesh. Ve'al toimar lifnei amalach kishgagahu. And don't say to the malach, here refers to the agent, that it was bishgaga. Lama yiktsoif halokim al kolecha. Why should HaKadosh Baruch Hu get angry upon your voice, v'chibel es maisi yadecha, and destroy the maisi of your yadayim, of your maisi yadecha? Says the Gemara, what is it referring to, the maisi yadecha, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would destroy? Ezi maisi yadav shel adam, Hevei omer bonav u'bnoisov shel adam. Tan Rabban, the Gemara means the other brisa along these lines, be'oven nidorim, bonim meisim divrei Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon. The opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Shimon is that bonim are meisim as a result for the avon of nidorim, when a person neglects, not just that he is late in then fulfilling his vow, but he is mevatel, and he has no intention to fulfill the vow. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Oimer Ba'ovan Bittul Torah. As a result of Bittul Torah, Bonim are Meisim, when they're minors. So Gemara says, Bishlam Lamanda Omar Ba'ovan Nidarim Kida Amoron. According to the one that says that children die young as a result of their parents' Avoin of Nidarim, that was stated before based on the pasuk that we quoted. Elalamanda Omar Ba'ovoin Bittul Torah Mikra. But the one who holds that it's a result of the neglect of limud haTorah, of Torah study, what's the verse that says that? Dirshu brings like a pasuk, Lashav hikesi, for not did I smite as b'neichem musar lo lakachu, your children for not learning Torah. Musar here is referring to the Torah, lo lakachu, they did not learn. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omar leman da'omar ba'oven nidorim nami mehocha. From this very verse, you can also see a reference to a person's children dying young as a result of the oven of nidorim, because it says lashov hikesi as b'neichem al iske shov, referring to shua shov nidorim. And the verse that was before that was a reference to children dying young. So therefore we see also that when a person is neglecting his nedarim or his Torah study, it's saying over here that children die young. Michdi asked the Gemara, let's analyze this. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, Hainu Rebbe. We know that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was Rebbe. The Rebbe says before, Ba'oven nedarim kamar. In the first brisa that we quoted, he says that children die young because of the oven of nedarim. And here, he says it's a result of the neglect of Torah study. Says the Gemara, to answer up this seemingly contradiction, the Gemara says, Basar deshama Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon. When he heard this, it was after he heard Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon was his Rebbe, and therefore when he quoted his father, that as a result of the oven of Nedarim, that children die young, then he adopted that view as well. And therefore, what he said earlier in the previous brisa was before he heard the statement of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon. Says the Gemara, Pligi bar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Rabbi Yosi. There's a machlokes between Rabbi Chia bar Abba and Rabbi Yosi in regards to children dying young. Chad amar be'ovon mezuzah, v'chad amar be'ovon bittul Torah. One said it's a result of the avon of neglect of putting mezuzahs on doorposts, whereas the other one says the neglect of Torah study. Laman da Omar be'avon mezuzah mikra nidrash lefonov v'lo lifnei ponov. The one who says it's a result of neglect of the mezuzah on the doorpost is because he darshans the pasuk Laman yirbu yemeichem v'imei v'neichem, that your children, yourselves and your children will have lengthy days. So he darshans that goes on the previous pasuk, which talks about the mezuzah. Uchsavtem al mezuzos beisecho uvisharecho. However, Laman da'amar ba'ovan mezuzah mikra nidrash lefonov v'loy lifnei fonov. Whereas the man da'amar who says, the man da'amar who ba'ovan bittul Torah mikra nidrash lefonov v'lifnei fonov. Whereas the one who says it's going on bittul Torah, he understands that Laman Yirbu Yumeichem V'mei V'neichem is going not just on the previous pasuk of mezuzah, but even before when it says Limatam Es B'neichem Ledars Limatam Es B'neichem Ledaber Bom, referring to Torah study. And therefore, according to that man Damar, he's saying that really it's mezuzahs and bittul Talmud Torah, neglect from Torah study, that results rather in children dying young as a result. Says the Gemara, Pligi bar Rabbi Meir Rabbi Yehuda. There's a machlokes in Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Chad amar ba'avon mezuzah, v'chad amar ba'avon tzitzis. One says it's a neglect of putting mezuzahs on one's doorposts when they're obligated to do so, whereas the other one says children die young as a result of the oven of tzitzis, of not wearing tzitzis on a four-corner garment that's obligated in tzitzis. So bishlam laman da'amar ba'avon mezuzah. According to one who says the oven mezuzah, dichsiv uchsavtam al mezuzos beisecho v'ksiv basrei leman yirbu yemeichem v'mei v'neichem. Like we explained before, there's a smichus that preceding the verse of leman yirbu yemeichem v'mei v'neichem is referring to mezuzos uchsavtam al mezuzos beisecho uvisharecho el leman da'omar ba'oven tzitzis my taima. But according to one who says tzitzis, what's the reason? You can't say because it's afterwards. That's the third parsha of Kriya Shema, but that's stated in the Torah somewhere much later. That's in Bamidbar, at the end of Parsha Shlach Lecha, where it talks about tzitzis. We just place it in the third parsha of tzitzis, of Kriya Shema, the tzitzis. So therefore, what is the man da'amar who says tzitzis? Why does he say that children die young? Rav Kahana v'itemashi lamari. There's a verse. Gam biknofayich nimtzu dam. Also, in the corners of your garments, blood was found. Nafshos evyoinim nikim. The pure souls of the poor ones. There it's talking about the Navi is saying that poor people who were neglected were killed. Their dam was found. But the Gemara is now darshaning, referring to b'knofayich nimtzu dam, referring to the dam is going to be found, referring to the four corner garments that had neglected being worn tzitzis. And evyonim, some learn that it's a contrast of two words together. It has the word av and bonim, and therefore when an av doesn't careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis, then it results chalila in bonim nikim, dying young. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Omar Lamanda Omar be'ovon mezuzah nami mehocha. He says it's also from this verse, the latter part of the verse. Dichsiv lo b'machteres b'matzasim, right? Meaning that the pasuk says we didn't find the dam in secret places, and the Gemara darshan she'osu psochim b'machteres, that they made psochim, doorways, in tunnels, referring to not avoiding the doorposts that are obligated in mezuzahs. They made it as if they were tunnels, and therefore that's a neglect in the mitzvah of mezuzah when they were indeed chayiv because there was a doorpost. Omreish Lakish kol hazohir, on the positive side, anybody who's careful betzitzis, zoichel meshamshin loy beis alofim v'ches meyos avodim. Tzitzis is a beged that represents that you're an Evid la Hashem, and therefore it reminds me what we said also Zechartam is called mitzvahs of Hashem. And therefore if a person is careful in the mitzvah of tzitzis, then he will be zoiche in the times of Mashiach to 2,800 avodim. As the Pasuk says, Shemar koyama Hashem tzvokos bayomim ha'hemo, those days during times of Mashiach, asher yachziku asara anoshim mikol leshonos. There'll be 10 people from all of the 70 nations, that's 700 of the goyim, v'hichziku beknaf ish Yehudi, and they're going to then hold on to the corner of the Jewish garment, of the Jew's garment. Leimor, they'll say, Neilcha imachem, we want to go with you and also serve Hashem. And therefore 700 on each corner times 4 is 2,800 goyim that are going to be grabbing onto the tzitzis of the Jew in the times of Mashiach. Says the Gemara, now a siman to remember the upcoming Gemaras. Sonei, Chala, Truma, Nigzeles, Dina, Shvua, Shifuchsa, Giluya, Unevelusa. Gemara now starts with the first siman of Sonei. Tanya, bringing a brayser of Nehemiah Oimer. Be'avon sinas chinam. The iniquity, the transgression of sinas chinam, the sin of hating your fellow man, not because he's a rasha, but because something that he does bothers you, you don't like his ways, he's different than yourself. Sinas chinam. Meriva rabba b'toich beis shel adam. First thing it causes is great fighting within a person's own home. V'ishtoi mapeles nifolim, causing a woman to his wife to then give birth prematurely and have miscarriages. Ubanav v'noisov shel adam meisim keshehin ketanim, and children dying young. Sinas chinam is the hatred, baseless hatred towards fellow Jews. So the midah keneged midah is that he'll have then hatred amongst those who love him and are in a house of his own children, the ones that he loves. And also children will not result because they'll then have miscarriages, and therefore he'll lose that as well. And also the children who have a relationship that he has of love, they will then die young as well. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer. Now we go to the next siman of Chala. Be'ovan Chala ein bracha b'mechunas. In the sin of Chala, not taking out dough from a piece of the dough from the challah, that itself, it will produce not having bracha in the storehouses of oils and grains, things that are basic necessities. There'll be a curse causing inflation. They're going to then plant seeds, and afterwards they're going to try to eat. It says, also I will do this, even I will do this to you. And I will visit upon you behala, distress, commotion, inner commotion, as hashachefes, various boils, ves hakadachas, high fever, machalos einayim, eyes that are pining, umedivois nofesh, and souls that are suffering, vizroyosov larik zarechem, and you're going to be planting for naught your seed, va'achlu oivechem, and instead your enemies are going to eat them. Al tikre behala, it says in the pasuk, ella bechala, as a result of not taking challah from the dough. However, what's the positive side of taking challah from the dough? V'im noisnin misbarchin. If a person does take challah and give to the kohen, then he'll be blessed. And as it says, reishis aruseisechem titnu la kohen. You shall give to the kohen the first of your dough, meaning the challah, lahaniach bracha el beisecha, to bring bracha to your household. The Gemara now goes on to the third siman that we had mentioned after soneh and challah is truma. Says the Gemara, be'ovan bitol trumois umaisrois. When a person neglects taking truma and giving it to the kohen, minat Torah, there's no shear, even a kol shehu, midrabanan, it's a 1/40th, 1/50th, 1/60th of his grain. Umaisrois, referring to the tithes, the two different tithes each year, one going to the Levi, the other one either going to the Ani or being brought as Meiser Sheni to Yerushalayim and eating the food in Yerushalayim. Shomayim ne'etzorim. The first punishment is melahori talu matar. The heavens will close its gates, so to speak. It will not produce rain, fall, and dew. V'hayoker hove, and it will be, inflation will be the norm. V'hasochar oved, and a person will not, he'll lose his schar, his ability to then make a living. They're going to run after parnasa and not be successful. Shneimar, it says, Tzia gam choim, that means the dry and also during the heat, yigzilu, mimei sheleg, they will steal from the days of the snow by not allowing produce to then be to produce. Sha'ol chato, their sins will go down to the depth. My mashma, what do you see from this pasuk? That's a reference that a person will not then gain produce because of the fact that he's neglectful in trumas and maisers. Tanya Rabbi Yishmael, they taught in the Beis Medrash Rabbi Yishmael, b'shvil dvorim shetzivisi eschem. Tzia is a reference, even though the Pashut understanding means it's dry, but it's a reference, they darshan, to the word tziva, to a command. Shetzivisi eschem b'yom hachama. I command you gam choim, during the days of the heat, when there's a time of reaping. V'lo asisem, and you didn't then do, meaning you didn't perform your obligations of trumas and maasros when you reaped your grain, then yigzilu mikem mimei sheleg miyos hageshomim, then you're going to then not be able to then reap your produce during the times and have the produce grow. It's going to be it won't be lasting during the times of the rain season to then develop into a good crop. The im noisten, however, if you do give tithes, you did good trumos and maasros, then you will be blessed. Here the Gemara brings a pasuk in regards to the meiser. When one brings the tremendous bracha he will gain. Shneimar, it says, Heviu es kol ha-meiser el beis ha-oitzar, bring me all of the meiser to the house of the storehouse. V'teref beveisi, and it will be then parnas in my home. Uvechanuni na bezois Omar Hashem tzvokos. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and test me. Unusually, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, and test me, mavchin me, in regards to then your taking of meiser. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven, and I will not open up and give you the bracha until there is no longer enough. Ask the Gemara, my ad b'lidai, what does it mean that there's no longer enough? No longer enough of bracha? Amar Rabbi Bar Rav, Amar Rav, ad sheyivlu. It's a play on the words, b'lidai, ad sheyivlu. Siv sochechem milomar dai, until your lips will be worn out from saying enough.